Welcome to the 5-Minute Disasters podcast from 5minutedisasters.com, where each week we uncover worldwide disasters in about 5 minutes. If you enjoy the show and would like to support us, why not consider buying us a coffee? Head on over to 5minutedisasters.com/coffee to see how. This is episode 3, Chernobyl, the world's worst nuclear disaster. The Chernobyl nuclear disaster remains the world's worst nuclear accident, both in terms of immediate impact and long-term consequences. On the 26th of April 1986, Reactor 4 at the Chernobyl Nuclear Power Plant in Pripyat, Ukraine, then part of the Soviet Union, exploded during a late-night safety test, releasing an unprecedented amount of radioactive material into the atmosphere. The explosion and subsequent fires released radioactive isotopes, including iodine-131, cesium-137, and strontium-90, into the environment, contaminating vast areas of Europe and beyond. The events leading up to the disaster were a combination of design flaws in the reactor, human error, and inadequate safety protocols. The test that night was meant to simulate a power outage and determine if the reactor's turbines could generate enough electricity to keep the cooling pumps running while waiting for backup generators to start. However, the test was delayed, and when it was finally conducted, the reactor was operating at dangerously low power levels. The operators, either unaware or ignoring key safety regulations, removed too many control rods from the reactor, causing an uncontrollable surge in power. At 1:23 a.m., 2 explosions occurred within seconds of each other, blowing off the 1,000-ton concrete roof of Reactor 4. The initial explosion was caused by the extreme pressure buildup inside the reactor, while the second was likely a result of a hydrogen explosion. The core was exposed to the air, and fires broke out immediately, sending massive plumes of radioactive smoke high into the atmosphere. Within hours, firefighters and plant workers were on the scene trying to extinguish the fires and contain the damage, but they were unaware of the extreme radiation levels they were being exposed to. Many of these first responders died within days or weeks due to acute radiation sickness. The Soviet government initially downplayed the severity of the accident. It was not until radiation detectors at a nuclear plant in Sweden, over 1,000 kilometers away, picked up abnormally high levels of radiation that the international community became aware that something catastrophic had occurred. By then, a massive radioactive cloud had spread across much of Europe, prompting widespread fear and uncertainty about the health risks and environmental damage. The immediate response to the disaster was marked by confusion, a lack of proper equipment, and insufficient knowledge of how to deal with the unprecedented situation. Within 36 hours, the Soviet authorities ordered the evacuation of Pripyat, a city of nearly 50,000 people. Evacuation orders soon extended to a 30-kilometer exclusion zone around the plant, eventually leading to the relocation of over 100,000 people. However, the evacuation came too late for many residents who had already been exposed to dangerous levels of radiation. In the days following the explosion, efforts were made to contain the radiation. Helicopters dropped sand, lead, and boron onto the reactor to try and smother the fires and absorb the radiation. Eventually, a massive concrete sarcophagus was built around Reactor 4 to contain the radioactive material, though this was only a temporary solution. In 2016, a more durable structure, the new safe confinement, was erected over the sarcophagus to prevent further leakage of radiation for the next 100 years. The human toll of the Chernobyl disaster is difficult to calculate precisely. Official Soviet reports claimed that 31 people died directly as a result of the explosion and acute radiation exposure, most of them firefighters and plant workers. However, the long-term health effects have been far more significant. The radioactive fallout from Chernobyl exposed millions of people to dangerous levels of radiation, particularly in Ukraine, Belarus, and Russia. The exact number of long-term deaths due to radiation-induced cancers and other illnesses is still debated, with estimates ranging from several thousand to tens of thousands. One of the most significant health impacts was a dramatic increase in thyroid cancer, particularly among children exposed to iodine-131. The environmental consequences of Chernobyl were profound and long-lasting. The exclusion zone around the plant remains largely uninhabitable to this day, with high levels of radiation persisting in the soil, plants, and animals. Forests and wildlife within the exclusion zone were severely affected, with large areas becoming radioactive wastelands. However, in a paradoxical twist, the absence of human activity in the exclusion zone has allowed some wildlife to return and thrive, despite the lingering radiation. Species such as wolves, deer, and birds have repopulated the area, making it a unique case study for scientists interested in how ecosystems adapt in the wake of human abandonment. The Chernobyl disaster had significant political and social consequences as well. It severely damaged the credibility of the Soviet government, particularly in the handling of the disaster and its attempts to cover up the extent of the crisis. The global outcry over the Soviet Union's slow response and lack of transparency contributed to the growing calls for reform within the country, and it has been argued that the disaster played a role in the eventual dissolution of the Soviet Union in 1991. In the years since the disaster, Chernobyl has become a symbol of the dangers of nuclear energy and the potential catastrophic consequences of technological failure. It sparked widespread anti-nuclear protests and led to significant changes in nuclear safety regulations worldwide. Countries reassessed their nuclear programs, and international organizations like the International Atomic Energy Agency, IAEA, developed stricter safety standards to prevent similar incidents from occurring again. Today, the site of the Chernobyl disaster remains a stark reminder of the dangers of nuclear power when not properly managed. While the new safe confinement structure has provided a more permanent solution to containing the radiation, the legacy of Chernobyl endures in the affected regions and in the global memory of one of history's worst nuclear disasters. As the world continues to debate the role of nuclear power in a sustainable future, Chernobyl serves as both a cautionary tale and a testament to the resilience of human and environmental recovery in the face of catastrophe. I hope you enjoyed that episode of the 5-Minute Disasters podcast from 5minutedisasters.com. If you did, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. And while you're there, why not leave us a review? Also, please consider listening to our other 5-minute podcasts, which you can find at 5minuteproductions.com. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.